Hi, welcome wherever you are. I really appreciate you joining me today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I really appreciate you being here. So, um, please put in the comments where you're from. If you have any questions, why did you join today? And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like my channel. I really appreciate it. So, my name is Dr. Barbara Schwark. I am the CEO of Clear Intentions International. I'm a CEO, yes, I am. I'm an executive coach and life coach, and I've been coaching for 25 years, big companies like Amazon, Bayer, Bombardier, Heinz, but I also work with small business owners, and I basically help you to look at your limiting beliefs, to find them, to neutralize them, and replace them with positive ones so that you can actually get what you want in life, whether that's creating a company, growing a company, having a happy marriage, or whether that's leading your team and being super effective and successful. So that's about me. You can find me at clearintentions.net. And if you have questions, just contact me. I'm happy to answer. So today's all about your self-imposed limitations. That means that we're not looking towards the outside, because the outside world is always going to give us things that will trigger us. I live in Israel, if you don't know, and I could say, oh, if there only wasn't a war, or if I only wasn't the middle child, or if I only, years ago it was like, if I only had my green card, everything would be better. And that's not what we're going to be talking about or looking at. We're going to talk and look at the self-imposed limitations. That means that I need you to be a little bit courageous, and I need you to be a little bit authentic, and also be honest with yourself, and so that you can actually have an experience, a different experience from what you have been having before. Let me start with a story, if I may. So when I started my coaching business about 25 years ago, shortly after I started, I wanted to have an office, because back then I was still meeting with my coaching clients one-on-one in my office, and I wanted to be in a nice place and nice neighborhood that people felt comfortable coming to. So I was able to rent from a group of therapists, and a few hours, a couple of days a week, I was meeting with my clients, and everything was wonderful. And this went on for a few years until one day the therapist decided that they wanted to no longer renew the lease, and that they wanted to retire. And I was panicked. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have an office, and I won't be able to find an office, and it's going to be super expensive. And I had a story that was just so negative, and I was convinced that it was the end, and I would have to leave the neighborhood, and nobody would come to me, and you know, soon my business was going to crumble, and that was it. And it took me a little bit to figure out that that story that I was telling myself was really based and rooted in unworthiness, that I wasn't worthy of having a great office, and I wasn't worthy of being successful, and that I really couldn't. So once I figured this out and I changed my tune, I replaced that limiting belief with a positive one. Sure enough, I got a lead, and the lead was for two buildings over across the parking lot, and it was going to be my own office for less money. Got to decide what the decor was going to look like. I painted the walls, and I got my own furniture, and bang, there you had it. And somebody was renting from me, but it was basically my office. So you could say luck. I don't think so. I am pretty convinced to this day that it was me changing my limiting belief about the situation and seeing myself as worthy that brought this office to me. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to look at those stories, and we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at how to identify those self-sabotaging stories and the limiting beliefs that we have. We're going to look to see how we can work with them and work with the inner critic, which is basically, I think, the job of the inner critic is to just keep us stuck and to keep us in place. And we're going to wake the inner champion. If you have already awaken them. No, that's not the right word. If your inner champion is already awake, then I'm going to teach you some skill how to even wake the inner critic up, inner champion up more. We're going to look at how to align our actions with authentic values and desires. We're going to approach tools, learn tools, how to move away from the comfort zone. I sometimes like to say we're going to escape the comfort zone. And we're going to look at neuroplasticity and how neuroplasticity fits into all of this and what neuroscience has to do with breaking free from our limiting beliefs. So that's what I have in store for you. Hopefully that's what you're looking for. And let's get going. So how do we identify limiting beliefs? So what is actually a limiting belief? A limiting belief is something that we form. And this is usually how it happens. Something happens, you had a negative experience, then you had a negative emotions that went with it, and then you had a negative interpretation that went with it. And if it happened several times in a similar way, then usually what forms is a limiting belief. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to happen this way. It can also happen that something happened once, and based on that, you decide to tell yourself a story, and the story stays with you. For example, let's say I was 3 years old when I came home one day and I decided to be creative, and I took the crayons and I drew all over my parents' apartment. And once my parents saw that, they decided to yell at me and say, don't do this. We don't use crayons and, draw all over the wall. And for some reason that day I wasn't as strong, or maybe I had too many of those, negative things that I heard from my parents. And then my brain decided to connect that negative experience with a negative story that I wasn't creative. And oftentimes what we do then with that is that we store that into our subconscious and unconscious, and we keep it there because we don't want to bring it forward, because that's a really negative experience. So in addition to that, we have what we call intergenerational trauma. So we can actually get negative beliefs through the DNA when we're born. And a lot of research has been done about that. And the intergenerational trauma goes back at least 2 or 3 generations. And some scholars actually believe that it goes way, way, way back. So it could be because my grandmother had a bad experience, that it went then through my mother, and then it came to me. And if you look at what's going on currently, and if you look at the generations that came before us, you can say, that we all struggle with trauma. We all have PTSD, because if we didn't experience it ourselves, it certainly was passed down by our parents, grandparents, great-great-parents, and so forth. So sometimes it's possible that you didn't necessarily have something negative that happened to you, and that you didn't necessarily form the negative beliefs yourself, but that you came by it honestly because it was passed through the DNA. And, oftentimes it's actually a combination of where we have intergenerational trauma. So we have limiting beliefs that we got from our families, and then we have limiting beliefs that we accumulated because of what things that happened to us in this lifetime. And so, boom, there you have it. We have a plethora of negative beliefs. So what's the impact of that? The impact of that is that it keeps us stuck. It keeps us in the place of, I can't, I won't, it's too difficult. I can't, I'm not good enough. And we tell ourselves stories because, in addition to that, human beings often, we like to be right. So even though it's negative, we still like to be right in our negativity. So we tell ourselves these stories, and then we really limit ourselves. If you're in one of these places right now, it's like, it's okay. The worst thing that you can do is actually beat yourself up and say, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Why don't I have all the knowledge? And it's really hard, because then you're putting more negativity on the negativity that you're already experiencing. So try and see if you can't be soft and sweet and gentle with yourself and say, you know what, I'm going through a very difficult period. I'm kind of stuck in this limitation and limiting stories that I tell myself. And I want to be gentle with myself because I know it's not going to last forever. And eventually I will climb out and there will be tools and I will be able to move on. Now, what today is all about is that I want to give you some tools and some tricks that help you to get out of this cycle faster. And that also gives you the opportunity to recognize it faster, and so that you can sort of stop yourself and not get thicker into the negative belief and actually fulfilling on it, but rather turn around and say, I'm not going to go down that street. I'm actually going to go down a different street because I know this street is going to lead me somewhere else. And the somewhere else is actually where I want to be. What else? So an example of this is, the classical story of I'm not good enough, because things that happen, let's say in my office or in my practice, there's a lot of people that had pretty traumatic events happening in their childhood, whether it was in school or whether it was that they moved. And sometimes the events are not necessarily, or they weren't meant to be traumatic. It's just like part of life. And what happened was that it impacted them pretty negatively. And it results in limiting beliefs such as, really, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, or I will never be good enough, and no matter how hard I work, it's not going to work. I'm smiling because that's like definitely used to be one of mine. Then no matter how hard I work, it's never going to be good enough. So if you recognize yourself here, then just know that you're in a good place, and that pretty much 99.9% of the world's population are dealing with it, and that you're not alone. Another way that you can recognize that you're telling yourself a story, or that a limiting belief is upon you, is because of the language that you use. So usually the language is kind of victim language. We use those never, I can't, I should, sort of strong words that keep us stuck, and we'll pretend that this is the ultimate reality, that there's kind of no way out, but this is how it is. And with that comes also the sentiment, or the sort of energy of victimhood, meaning that when we feel like we're a victim, it's like nothing's really going to help us, because again, we have to be righteous about being a victim, because we want to be right, and even though it's not comfortable, we're still going to be a victim. Okay, so that's a lot of negativity, and it's a lot of negative beliefs, but in order for you to have a full experience about where we're going with this and how we're going to tackle this, I'm going to take you through a short process. And for that, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. So if you're driving, perhaps put this on pause or do this at a later point. And if you have a piece of paper and a pen right next to you, that would also be beneficial. So go ahead and close your eyes. And as you're doing so, if you're comfortable, that is, take a deep breath. And as you're breathing in, just allow yourself to become more present with yourself. I've talked a lot, and just sort of let that all pass. Just allow yourself, again, to take a deep breath. And as you breathe out, maybe you breathe out and let it out with a big sigh. And the third time, breathe in your own timing. And as you breathe out, just breathe out with a sigh. And every time we focus on our breathing, usually our heart rate slows down, and we become more present to our thoughts and our feelings and our sensations. And if you believe in a higher power or in a higher self or a spiritual part of yourself, oftentimes when we're breathing in deeply and focusing on the breath, that part becomes more strongly visible to us. Now, I'd like you to focus on an area in your life where you're currently struggling. Could be personally, could be professionally, could be in both areas, but just focus on one. And as you're focusing on that, I encourage you to be strong and just be present to what's showing up for you. What are you feeling? What are you seeing? Who's involved? Can you identify your limiting thoughts? Can you hear yourself? And in all that, is there a central theme that's showing up? And can you identify it? What is that central theme? You're not good enough. Not worthy. Not smart enough. Not strong enough. You don't have it in you. What is it? Just take a moment to be present to it. And then file it away and look at a different area that's challenging for you right now. Maybe you're studying something or learning something, and it's a struggle for you. Maybe you're not a good learner. Maybe you don't have enough time for yourself to take care of yourself. Maybe it's producing anxiety. Just once again, see who's involved, what's going on, and your thoughts around it. Usually our thoughts are kind of limiting. We try to trump them with some positive thoughts, but they're usually negative. So let them be. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Just let it be. And then once again, is there a central theme? Some kind of line that keeps repeating itself in different variations. And if so, let that come forward. Now, take a moment to remember the first line and see if it's a similar one or a different one. Because in a moment, when we're finished with this process, I'm going to ask you to write them down. So take another deep breath, or maybe 2 or 3, and then in your own time, I'm going to ask you to come back and write down the central theme, central limiting belief that you have identified. And if you want, you can post it in the comments if you feel comfortable. And you will see that a lot of the times it's kind of similar. Human beings, we often have issues with feeling worthy. So thank yourself for participating and being honest and being vulnerable. And let's see what we can do to rewrite those stories. So we're going to start with the mental level. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the brain later, but for now I'm going to just sort of start in the mental area level. One of the things that we can do is we can reframe. We can take that limiting belief and we can replace it with a positive belief. But it's not so easy. So I can't just, I could just say, hey, I'm good enough. I'm great. And for some people, that will do it. You identify the negative belief and then you replace it with a positive one. But oftentimes what happens is that eventually that negative belief will come back. However, I encourage you, if you are present to the negative belief, that you take a little tiny step and replace that negative belief with the next likely, possible, real, positive belief. That you make a baby step. That you ask yourself a question. Oh, maybe I could be worthy. What if I was worthy? What if it wasn't all that bad? And so that you prop the door open and you let a tiny little bit of positivity in. So basically, you take that lock, you put the key in and you turn it, and you see if you really can't question that negative limiting belief. The next tool is something that you're probably very familiar with called affirmations. So affirmations have been around forever. And recently on my visit to Italy, I realized, I had this awareness that all these statues with these sayings, these grandiose sayings that the Pope or whoever was saying were really kind of affirmations, reminding them of who they were and what they were up to. And underneath, I'm kind of wondering if they had low self-esteem, and that's why they had to constantly tell themselves how great they were, because they didn't want to question themselves and they didn't want to be questioned. So, but we're looking at affirmation in a different way. We're looking at affirmation as a way to affirm who you are and what you want to accomplish. So it's usually a combination of being, affirming your beingness, and then also affirming the doing. What is that beingness of yours going to do? And the two of them together produce a beautiful affirmation for ourselves. So affirmations are powerful because they change neuroplasticity. And changing neuroplasticity is what we're all about. Because once the neuroplasticity in our brain has changed, which basically means that you're learning new things, we have accomplished something that will be more permanent. Now, affirmations can take a while, and you need to be persistent in using them. So you can't just say, hey, I'm going to be doing it one day and then expect for it to work right away. Persistence and consistency is very important when we use affirmations. Now, I want to do another short closed eye process, because a third tool here is visualizations. Visualizations and seeing ourselves being successful is super, super helpful because it activates all kinds of parts of the brain, including neuroplasticity, but it also helps our neuropeptides form new neural pathways. And we also get to sort of thrust ourselves forward and see different things about ourselves. So go ahead, close your eyes again, and start again with taking a few deep breaths. Then, if you're driving, just maybe stop or listen to this and then just do this closed eye process later. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and you breathe out. And once again, you breathe out with a sigh. And let's do that again. Breathe in and breathe out with a sigh. And then let all the stress, the anxiety, or whatever is going on, just let it all go. And bring back that area that was so challenging for you, or perhaps is still challenging for you. And now thrust yourself into the future. Can you see a different future self? Can you see yourself being a little successful? Can you see yourself doing things, feeling things, being with people? Be courageous. And if you can't see anything, just make it up. Pretend that you know where you want to be or what you want to experience. And get into the details as much as possible. I give you a moment to really bring everything present. The sound, the smells, the environment, the people. Really get into the detail. Now, sometimes it's difficult for us to see ourselves in our imagination. So if it helps you, you can also imagine that there is a giant screen in front of you and just see yourself acting on the screen just the way you want to. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just a little bit, so that you move yourself forward. Now, if you're done with the one scene, just bring to mind the other challenging area. And you do the same thing here. See yourself winning in your fantasy, in the future, having accomplished the things that you want to accomplish, whether that's reaching a sales goal or leading a team or starting a family or starting a company or whatever it is, or health goal. Maybe you want to lose some weight. Maybe you want to be fit, run a marathon, feel good about yourself, find a new apartment or a house, whatever it is, to see yourself living in that house. with as much detail as possible. And now it's time to bring that to close. Know that you can always come back. And when you're ready, just open your eyes and let's continue with the lecture. Now, those three things that I just talked about, they mainly deal with our cognitive levels. And they dip a little bit into the emotions, but it certainly doesn't get us into the subconscious and unconscious. And in order for us to understand more about that, I'm going to do a little brain lecturette, which I often do in my presentations. So you may have heard it before, but I can assure it's worthwhile to listen to it again. So as you know, the brain controls everything about us. Our thoughts, our feelings, the muscle movement, why I have the shirt on, why I select my friends, why I say certain things, everything that has to do with us is connected to the brain. Now, basically, the brain has three levels. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but I like to explain how the brain works in simple terms so that I can understand it. And when I can understand it, hopefully you can understand it. So the first level is what we call the neocortex. The neocortex is the smart part of the brain. It's the part of the brain where everything that has to do with intellect, with language, is being produced. And I say being produced because it is a biochemical process. We need language because we can't create goals without language. When I say I want to make $1 million or I want to lose 50 pounds, it's all in the language. Even when I ask you to visualize something, you're seeing a tree and there's a word and there's language that is connected with it. So I need that. I need my intellect. Now, the funny part about this is that the neocortex is the only part of the brain that's conscious, and it makes for about, let's say, 8 to 12% of our entire brain. So, meaning it's not that much. And conscious meaning that technically I can actually control my thoughts and I can control what comes out of my mouth. And we all know how difficult that is. The next part of the brain is called the limbic system. The limbic system is where emotions are being produced. It also regulates our temperature. And sometimes when we have strong emotions, our temperature changes. We get hot, we get cold. You get angry and you feel cold. You have anxiety if you feel hot. So there's all kinds of physical sensations that go with it. And it's right below the conscious line, meaning it's subconscious. Subconscious meaning it's like a beach ball. If I have a beach ball and I push it down and I release the pressure, that I can actually feel it. And that's usually what we do with the negative emotions, because the positive emotions, no problem, we like to feel them. Last but not least, we have the reptilian brain. Reptilian is all about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn meaning pleasing. It's now being, new research has been done that pleasing is definitely one of the ways that we survive, because we don't want to be abandoned, because if we get abandoned, we're probably going to die, because back then when we were living in a cave, being alone was a sure way to die. So this reptilian, when it gets activated, responds in one of those four ways, and sometimes it has more than four ways. We have running away, we have fighting, we have playing dead, just like nature, and then we have pleasing. So this reptilian brain is where most of our unconscious negative beliefs that hold us back are being stored. And you can see it's not rational, because it's not a rational part of the brain. So when we say we're unworthy, we're not good enough, it doesn't sound rational. Why do we have it? Because it comes from that part of the brain. Now, the unconscious and the subconscious make for about 88% of our brain. So you can see, if we are thinking that we can will ourselves into a direction, it's very limited, because only 12%, if at most, part of our brain is actually controlling our willpower. So we're much more successful when we can take the unconscious and subconscious into consideration and we move forward with that. So most likely you're stuck and you're procrastinating and you're feeling whatever you're feeling is because something is going on in the unconscious and subconscious part of our brain. Now, how do we deal with that? Ooh, that's such a good question, and I love to get into it right away. One of the ways that we get into it, actually, there's three different things that you can do. One of them is with meditation and with journaling and something called freeform writing. So before we go into how do we get to the subconscious and unconscious, let's just talk a little bit about how I can actually get myself a little closer to that part of my consciousness. So journaling, I said journaling, freeform writing, and mindfulness and meditation. Now, journaling, what that does, it relaxes our mind, which then gives our emotions more of an opportunity to be present. Because oftentimes we like to keep ourselves so busy with our thought process that we can't really access our emotions. So when you start journaling, because you're directing your mind, your emotions by default often come up. And I encourage you, if you like to journal, to actually do it for a 30-day process, because you will see that oftentimes it takes a little bit to get into it in order for it to have the impact that you want it to have. And that within time, you will see that more and more of your emotions will actually make themselves known. And oftentimes people will say to me, my clients, like, why do I want to feel my emotions? Like, what good does it do? Well, it does a lot of good, because sometimes just managing them means that you're actually in a better space. So we definitely don't want to push them down. We want to feel them, because the process of feeling our emotions and then letting them go works only if you're fully present. Think about a 3-year-old who's having a temper tantrum. This 3-year-old just goes, feels that very strongly, and then 5 seconds later is done with it. Why can't we do it? We can, we don't. And so we intellectualize the process and we hold on to them, then we judge ourselves, and then like the emotions kind of get stuck. And that is a biochemical stuckness that I'm talking about. Freeform writing is a process that I highly recommend, and it's wonderful. And I was taught it by my spiritual teacher many, many, many years ago. And that's taking a piece of paper and a pen and then writing down your emotions for about half hour, uninterrupted. And you don't censor yourself, just vomit everything on a piece of paper. Now, the important thing here to know is that before you start the process, you have made the commitment that A, you're not reading what you're writing, and that you will destroy it as soon as you complete without reading it. So it's important that you don't read it, because you don't want to bring it back and pregnant yourself with those thoughts. It's a release process. It's a way to get these things out of your energy field. And there's a couple things that happen when you destroy it. A, your consciousness knows that nobody's going to read it, and so that you can really let it go. And the other part is that it's actually being transformed. And last but not least, there's meditation. And meditation is also really good for our nervous system, because it allows us to relax, and it allows our brain to relax, our body to relax. And therefore, the deeper layers of our emotions can actually come up and we can deal with them. But once again, it's not a process that you can do sort of once or twice. Maybe you've had a long-standing meditation practice and you stopped, and you can quickly go back to it. But usually it's something that we have to get used to, because we want to train our muscles to be in that space and that we can actually hold for ourselves. So those are 3 things that you can do to get into a deeper layer and deal with your not just the intellect, but also deal with your emotions, and maybe even dip a little bit into your unconscious. Now, what can we do to get into the unconscious? Because that is really, I think, where we can hit the gold, or a better way to say it, maybe what's the fastest way to get there. So there are a lot of different techniques out there, and more are rising to the, becoming available to us. One of them is EMDR, one of them is hypnosis. Those are 2 of the things that have been around for a while. And then there's something called muscle testing. Muscle testing is kinesiology, which is what I do. I use kinesiology and coaching and positive psychology and organizational development, and I've created something called neuro-emotional coaching. And the purpose is to use the muscle testing to really pinpoint what part of your consciousness is holding that limiting and negative belief, and then through a 15-step process, we neutralize it biochemically so that you have more space and can actually then take the action that you need in order to have the different result. Muscle testing is a 2,000-year-old technique that comes to us from the Far East and was rediscovered by an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Lovett, in the 19th century from Boston. So, and it's based on the premise that when we say something that we believe in, or say something that's good for us, or something that's positive, that a muscle will perform stronger than the opposite when we say something that we don't believe in or it's not good for us. Now, it's a cooperative test. And even though there's a lot of sort of negativity surrounding muscle testing, I can assure you it's amazing. It works amazingly. And there's a bunch of studies that were done that actually show that it's valid and that it works. So I think muscle testing is a wonderful way to immediately find out if you believe in something that you want, because it's kind of like your own personal lie detector. So combined with coaching and neuroemotional coaching, I think it's the fastest way to actually turn those negative beliefs into positive beliefs. Now, so let's say I have taken care of my negative belief and I've turned it into a positive belief, whether I did freeform writing or I did reframing or I did some neuroemotional coaching. Now I need to move myself into the space of where I want to take actions. So it's important to note here that when we take action, there's often things that trigger us. Okay, so that's normal. It's not like once you clear out all of your negative belief that you're not going to get triggered again. It's just part of life. However, we want to make sure that you have your actions aligned with who you are and your values. And at this point, I'm just assuming that you know what you want, because you're here because you're stuck somewhere. So you probably know what's on the other end. And if you don't know this entirely, it's okay. And if you've worked on your values, that's good. If you haven't, you want to take some time to identify your values. Values are the things that sort of guide us. They're not like, like the latest, oh, I'm going to be generous for the next 5 years. No, those are the things that are intrinsically belong to you, and your decisions, your process, and who you are rests upon that. And you probably know what your values are. Maybe you've never identified them. If you haven't, I suggest that you do. I always say have at least 3, but no more than 5. And if you go on my YouTube channel or you look on my website, there are some tools that I can assist you with to find out what your values are. Once you know what your values are, it becomes so much easier for you to take action, because we have who we are aligned with what we want, and then we kind of know what the next action step needs to be. Now, it's important that the action steps are 50% realistic and that they're small, and so that we can know ahead of time that we're going to be successful. Let me say a word or two about goals. So when I look at goals, it's important that we make a distinction between goals that are quantifiable and qualifiable. And for me, when we have both elements, it's more likely that we will be successful. So oftentimes I say, start with your intention around something. Think about an area in your life. Let's say we talked earlier about, increasing the revenue of your business. So don't think about that so much, but just think about your business and think about what you want to experience. How do you want to feel? And I call that intention. That's the quality. And then I think about the goal that you have. What is it that you want to really, really have at the end? And just make sure that the two of them are in line with one another, so that you have your intention, which is sort of the emotion or the experience that you want to have, and you have your goal, which is the tangible thing that you have. And then you can think about the methods. How am I going to get myself from A to B? For example, if I want to be healthier, or I'm looking at the area of my health, my intention would be I want to feel vital, I want to feel strong, I want to feel wake up in the morning, and I want to have lots of energy. And then my goal could be that I want to run a 10K under an hour. And then I can think about the methods that I want to use in order to get myself there. So maybe it would be a combination of training. Maybe it would be, 2 times a week biking and 2 times a week running. So I would look at what my methods are in order to get myself to this goal. But ultimately, what I'm always after is my intention that I want to feel a certain way. We can't make a decision in the absence of emotions. There's a famous book by Antonio Damasio. It's called Descartes' Error, and he talks about that in detail, and he describes the neuroscience behind it. So I'm assuming that you know what you want and that you have values, and then you're now aligning your actions with the values and who you are, and that you have small, tiny steps that are based in 50% reality and that are small enough that you can actually accomplish them. And that is a great formula for success, because if you have a small action step and you know that you can do it, and then you build upon that and you have 10, 20, 30, 40 of them, it makes us feel very good and very strong, because we have now more evidence that we can actually do it. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about values for a moment. I wanted to just give you an example of why this is important. So let's say my values are, I want to be loving, adventurous, fun, kind, and happy. And my goal is to make $1 million. I might have trouble with that because I could still make $1 million, but my values aren't so much about making $1 million. It's that my values are probably about other things that are more important. So really take a good look at the values and the goals that you have. You want to make sure that they're nicely aligned. Okay. So I have my roadmap now. I know how to deal with my limiting beliefs, and I'm working on them constantly. I have my goals, my values. I know where I'm going. So I need a couple things. And one of them is to stay consistent. I need to stay consistent. And I said that around affirmations as well. It's very important that I do something on a consistent basis. And even though if it doesn't work out, it's okay. Like I remember training for a marathon, and what was important for me is that I trained. Maybe I couldn't reach my goal, my training goal for that day, but I still put my outfit on and I went out. And some days it was better and some days it wasn't. And it didn't matter, because all mattered that I actually kept my commitment. So be consistent and keep your commitments and do something. Second, I already said that, make sure that you make decisions, that your decisions are rooted and based in your values, intentions, and goals. So decide. You can't just wait. It's like, even if the decision wasn't so good, doesn't matter. Decide and take some actions. It's nothing is worth than sitting on the fence and not deciding, because eventually fate will decide for you. And you don't want that. You want to decide. And it's okay to make a mistake. I have a webinar on imposter syndrome. You can listen to that, because oftentimes people say, I have imposter syndrome, I can't decide. Decide. It's perfectly fine to make a mistake. So what else do I want to tell you? I wanted to talk a little bit about the gremlin, and I wanted to talk about awakening your inner champion. So gremlin is that part of us that likes to keep us small. It's the part that points out the limiting beliefs. And the inner champion is the opposite. It's the part of us that tells us that we're great and that we can actually do things. So one of the things that you want to do with the gremlin is you want to love the gremlin. You want to not fight him or her, but be kind and generous. And the inner champion, what you want to do is you want to think about a time where you really felt that you accomplished something and that you were really good and proud of yourself. And then think about the tools, the tasks, and especially the qualities that you used in order to accomplish that. And then I recommend that you take a moment every day to acknowledge yourself, that you champion yourself for the little wins that you had that day. And sometimes it's just getting out of bed. What else helps us to move forward when we're stuck? It's having a great support system. It's being loving and compassionate with ourselves. And like I just said, really take a moment to champion yourself on a daily basis. Really, sometimes I just say, Barbara, it's great you got out of bed and you didn't want to. All right, so let's pull it all together. Now, you want something and you can't get yourself to do it, or you did something about it and it didn't work out. Well, in order to have something new, you really need to start doing something different. And what you want to do is you want to identify that negative belief. You want to turn it around, whether you do meditation, free-form writing, whether you do something like neuroemotional coaching, really confront it, do something about it. Don't just let it linger there. You want to strengthen your inner and outer support, maybe hire a coach, or maybe you have friends or family that are really supporting you. You want to find a way to talk to your inner critic and love that inner critic and champion that part inside of you that remembers and knows the wins that you had. And I want to finish with a story, so to show you that this can actually all work out. So a while back, I coached a musician. And first of all, when she came to me, she had no idea what success looked like and what she wanted. And we started to clear away a lot of the limiting beliefs around success and who she was. And she realized what she really wanted. And within about 3 months, she was able to double her income. And then she was able to pursue her real dreams. And she started to go for it. Now, it was a long road, but she didn't stop herself. And even when she got a no along the way, she was able to keep going. True story. Now, finally, to wrap it up. First of all, once again, let me tell you, I'm glad that you're here. And I want to let you know that I believe in yourself, because you're here because you know that you can do it. And it's important that you recognize that somewhere inside of you, there's a little spark or a little seed, and that you keep watering it. And in order to support this journey that you're on, I want to tell you two things. First of all, be courageous in your approach and allow yourself to be clear about your negative beliefs. Just look at them straight in the eye and see them for what they are. Because the more we keep them in the shadows and hide them away from us, the more havoc they create. Two, allow yourself to be present to the love that you have for yourself and see that you can increase that love and support. And last but not least, if there's judgment, see if you can forgive yourself, because when we forgive ourselves, we can actually release the negativity that we have inside of ourselves. So those are my tips that I have for you today. And a final word and a final offer for you. If you liked what you heard, please sign up for my newsletter and you'll find out about other LinkedIn Lives. But for those of you who are really interested and you want to move fast, or you want to break out, or you want to have a rapid transformation, I am offering today a 10% discount on my 3-month coaching program. All you need to do is sign up for a free 30-minute consult, introduction call, and see if we're a good fit. And then I will honor that. And for those of you who are struggling with income, or your business owners, sign up for a 15-minute consultation, and I will do a free spiritual consciousness assessment and tell you where you are and tell you what you need to do in order to align yourself to climb or get into the next income bracket. That's it for today. I hope you learned many, many things that are useful for you. If you have questions, please contact me, and I wish you